Hello, everyone. This is Keith F. Shovlin, and welcome to Son of Swift Genealogical Pursuits. It is the 31st of December, 2024, so it is the end of the year. Now, unlike previous episodes where I usually didn't get on until almost midnight, I'm going to be staying up till midnight, of course, for seeing the ball drop in New York and watching it with my family. But I wanted to get this done earlier in the night so that it was done and I was free for my family obligations as well as a few other things. Now, last week I did the year in review that Ancestry sent of the various things that I found through their system. This week I've done a ton more research and I'm going to dive a lot more into that next week because since it is December 31st, this is going to just focus on being a year in review, just looking overall at my whole setup for genealogical research this year. Now, I have been doing this research for over 20 years, starting with family histories, family Bibles, stories from grandparents, anything that I could cobble together to build my basic tree. And from then, was able to do a ton of research, and a lot of that research I've done has able to give me the unique set of skills that makes most of this stuff just come together pretty easily. And that's, if in case it's the first time joining us, that's why this podcast exists, to not only share my findings, but also share those research tips so that you can do your own family history research. You can determine and discover your own roots and then have that to be part of your family history, to part of your family tradition, and something to share with your loved ones, especially now in this holiday season. Now, up here, my blog, of course, you can always reach out to me. I am on Tumblr. The blog is shown here, The Son of Swift. That's sonofswift.tumblr.com. Or you can email me at SEIBHLEAIN. That's the Irish spelling of my last name, Shovlin at gmail.com. So any questions you have, you can through Tumblr there in the comments below. I'll see them all. So I welcome any and all comments, questions, criticisms even. I try my best to find the accurate information and share it with my family. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes I find incorrect information and there's nothing to tell me that it's incorrect. Sometimes I make educated guesses, and sometimes those educated guesses aren't true, don't work out, and sometimes they do. But for now, let's talk a little bit. Let's do first the quick things of the regular checkups we do every week. First up is our email check-in. So every week I have a family history, family surname search. So I set up my Google alerts so that I get surname bangs for any news involving my surname or the surname of my ex-wife. Because as part of doing the family history research, that's finding people that are cousins, other parts of the family. We both have last names that are sort of unique. So most likely when I find someone that has the same last name as either of us, they are cousins in some way. So starting off this week, as always, we start with the Angevine tree. And let's see. First, we have a Facebook post for a missing dog. An obituary for Alonzo Angevine passed in 2018. Margaret Angevine 2013. So Legacy.com did another update. We have Avril Angevine's art lecture series on Jack London, the photographer. Fox 40. Virginia Angevine obituary from 2015. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Helm Vingard Madeline Angevine, Denmark. Very interesting. Looks like Danish wine. We have a YouTube from Harley Angevine sharing Christmas presents for 2024. Let's see. Real estate agents, Immobilier Angevine, estate agents, sales and rental services in Brisac, Queens, Pays de l'Or, France. And we have DeWitt Angevine on Twitter. And then finally on Threads, Alan Angevine wishing Merry Christmas, everyone. So now over to the Shovlin surname search. And as usual, top of the list, Andrew Shovlin, the Mercedes trackside engineering director for an F1 racing. So any interest, Lewis Hamilton's driving force, information with Mercedes, it seems to be the most popular member of my family, distant family. Here's some more Plan F1, Motorsport Week, MSN, Sports Illustrated, Yardbarker, MSN, Motorcycle Sports, keeps on going. More Andrew Shovlin. And in fact, that seems like that is going to be it for this week. Okay, there is an Athens News article about ethics, identification, and regulation of AI content in which it quotes a Shovlin. It cuts it off as to who. Ways to avoid some of disinformation and misinformation when utilizing AI to generate content, and telling you how you can prompt ChatGPT to rule out the incorrect stuff. So not much on the surname list this week. Obviously, a bunch of obituaries on the Angevine side. It looks like Legacy.com did some sort of update that those articles are popping up again, but not much to look at on the Shovlin side. So now let's do this year review. So I have been doing the genealogy research off and on for, like I said, 2 decades. And you get burned out after a while. You hit so many brick walls. You do fruitless searches for the same names over and over again and find nothing. And it gets very, very debilitating, deflating, any word you want to put on it. It takes a reason to get back into genealogy research. That reason could be helping out a friend do genealogy research, helping another part of the family. Say there's a wedding coming up, a child being born, and you want more information on the family history. Now, what we have here is my main blog, sonofswift.tumblr.com, and these are all the posts from 2024. And it was pretty quiet for a 4-year period up until August of this year. What we had is in July, my paternal grandmother's family. So my paternal grandmother was Hazel Roach. She passed in 2021. Her family, the Roaches, and her parents were William Robert Roach and Hazel Allen. We had a joint family reunion of the Roaches and the Allens. So we had been invited. We had talked over about going, and so we were going. And I figured this would be a great opportunity to showcase my research. And I had done some limited book printings before. I used to have a website that had everything. Now everything's on Ancestry because it's just more universally available. This was a chance to reach out to family members who weren't doing any family history research, weren't paying attention to any of it. So we have here 4 fan charts created using the Reunion in genealogy app for Macintosh. This is working off. Been a Mac user for longer than I've been doing genealogy, and it's just works well with me. So what you see here is the differences between the fan charts before I started researching on July 1st and after. So you see there, this is on the left side here is Hazel Allen, was my paternal grandmother's mother. So you can see how much was filled in there, only going so far back as you see her parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. So that's 2 greats past my great-grandmother. And then there started to be holes. Here it is after July 1st, the various research. As you can see, I've still had everything for the great-greats, but I filled in quite a few of the great-great-great-grandparents. And so there's a little bit more to figure out still, but that's a colossal step forward on that. And in looking at some of them, you see it now goes back as much as 10 generations from my great grandmother. So that would be 14 generations from my kids. Then her husband, my paternal great-grandfather, William Robert Roach. As you can see, before July 1st, had up back to his great-grandparents and a little bit of the most of the great-great, but not much beyond there. After July 1st, see, still had some of those spots in the great-great, but I was able to go much farther back on some of the others. So most of the research I did before the family reunion was on the Allens, because as you can see, going back to the difference between before and after with Hazel Allen, especially on the Allen name itself, that covered a lot more of the tree there. So then I had these printed up as large posters and brought them to the reunion and was able to show them off. And while there, I also had my computer and was able to bring up stuff and be able to do some quick research there with some of my relatives that have done some ancestry research, have done some family history, and pointed me to some other things. And part of that, of course, I discussed in previous weeks, was the connection to the Mayflower that I did not know we previously had. So going back to the blog. Now, so that was the first post in 4 years in August. Then, less than a few days later, I had to do a post on watching your sources. So, as I said here, that I thought I had some detail, and then it looked like another family person who had done research on ancestry, had found certain information that would be extremely helpful in going even farther back on my primary line, the Shovlin line. And it turned out that 3 or so family trees had based putting dates on their information off of another person's tree, where they very clearly said with asterisk, this is a guess. Date is a guess, location is a guess. That's not helpful at all for doing family history research. So a reminder to watch your sources. Then we had it all comes back to the 1890 census. Anytime I'm doing family history research, especially a lot of the research I've been doing the past couple weeks, it's a lot of the late 1800s. And there's a major blocking there, the loss of the 1890 census to a fire with the Department of Commerce building in the early 20th century. And of course, this hampers my research. It hampers other people's research. My father does research in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where I am broadcasting from tonight. And not having that 1890 census is a bane of our existence. It's as bad as the loss of the library at Alexandria, which I still miss. Still a sad day for that. But in the 1890 census, we did get this glimmer. And when I found this quote, I just had to share it, that there really was a lot to the 1890 census, not just the information that was provided in it. But as it said here, the superintendent of the census described the western part of the country, of the United States, as having so many pockets of settled area that a frontier line could no longer be said to exist. The advance of the frontier line that characterized shifts in population distribution for the previous 100 years was complete. So it was the end of the settler era in the late 1800s that was spawned by the gold rush in California in 1849, the Civil War in the 1860s, Reconstruction in up to 1870, and just the general expansion west to the end of the 1800s. Next up, we had a conundrum where I had a tale of conflicting information about two possible people that either one could have been my ancestor John Donne. That was on my mother's side of the family. Then this was my search on the Fitzgeralds. I had been looking at information that tied me to a church in Cork, Ireland. So whereas, as I've said here, using Ancestry as a stepladder, I have reached out to the church on their genealogical information forum. I haven't heard anything back. And that was September 3rd. So that's going on 4 months. That's a case I think of. They probably have so many things that getting to mine would probably take forever. They only have so much time. And then, of course, it could be that they have nothing to show me, so they're trying to find something. Next was the discovery of a biography of my fourth great grandfather that was tied to one of the family history trees on Ancestry. And when I was able to track it down and double check the provenance that's written into it, found out some important information about my great 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 grandfather. And now I know that that is most likely a brick wall I'm never going to be able to climb, as he was orphaned at a young age, him and his brothers, and moved from Ireland to England before then going from England to the United States years later. So the chance of being able to track down his parents is going to be near impossible. So, and that unfortunately happens. Let me see. September 12th, September 11th, my first of this podcast. Here we have some vital records hints. Oh, this was actually, I've been doing a lot of research. In fact, if you look at my drafts, there's about 11 different draft articles there where I was just doing so much time in the research and I needed to blog about it. I talked about it on the podcast here, but I didn't write down and blog everything. But since I've been off work this week, celebrating the holiday with my family, I've been able to do more genealogy research. So these are the blog posts just from this past week, which reinforce some of the research I've been doing over the past, in some case, past few months, in other cases, the past few decades. So this was an interesting one, the O'Neill mystery. Now, before just a few years ago, one of the big mysteries of my family were the parents of my maternal grandmother, Helen Cecilia Brown. They were Alice O'Neill and Michael Thomas Brown. All I knew about Michael Thomas Brown is that he was born in Ireland and that he and his wife broke apart and the kids were pretty much left to themselves at a young age. I was led to believe that she had died. I had them both in the 1880 census, but once again, no 1890 census. So it was a very clear brick wall that was hard to get over until just a couple years ago when the good state of New Hampshire, very thankfully, posted a lot of their records digitally online and shared with Ancestry that include birth records, death records, marriage records, divorce records, and all four helped me solve most of that mystery. I had Alice O'Neill until her death now. I had her parents' names, Mortimer O'Neill and Alice Mahoney. I had the fact that she and Michael Thomas Brown divorced in 1891 by, by his request at her fault for adultery, which was quite interesting, having her then remarried to a man named Webster and having a small child with him that unfortunately did not live long. And then she, of course, died in the 1890s, as I expected. Now, that was mind blowing when I found all of that. And of course, I was able to find more information going back with her father, not too much more beyond her father and mother, but it was a lot more helpful. I still had more to find on Michael Thomas Brown. I did have their wedding record, which gave me Michael Thomas Brown's father, but their names are William Brown and Michael Brown, and they're from Ireland. That does not help narrow things down, really, pretty much at all. So this is what I found this week. I was continuing to do, I decided to look back into the O'Neills again to see if there's anything fresh that came up, and I made a slight realization. I did not have Alice O'Neill's, I'm sorry, Morty O'Neill, his wife was Kate Dugan, not his mother's with Alice Mahoney. That's what I'm sorry, but incorrect there. I had information about Morty. I had Kate. I had, of course, Helen and her brother Billy. I did not know when Alice O'Neill was actually born. I had her in the 1870 census, the 1880 census, and of course, that's the end of the line on census data, which can give me a general idea of when she was born. The records all painted in a complete picture because there wasn't a birth record for an Alice O'Neill. But what I had did point to her being born in 1861. So I decided to try to track down more information. This time I found that I had to search not for Mortimer, his proper name, for my three-time great grandfather, but by Morty, which sometimes could be marked as Marty. And that was able to find some information, such as the wedding record for him and Catherine Dugan, his death record, her death record, which unfortunately, a sign of the times you have in genealogy research. Catherine Dugan is listed on her death record, the official note of her demise, as Mrs. Mortimer O'Neill. She has died and she is lost for, giving up her name for her husband. And this isn't an indictment over women changing their names upon marriage. This is a fault in the records keeping that they failed to list her by her proper name. So I have that they were married in 1859. I have that marriage record now. June 5th, 1859, exactly, in Nashua. So now, of course, we're looking for Morty. And here's a record. Oh, here's a birth record for an O'Neill daughter. No name listed. Father's name Morty O'Neill or Marty, depending on how it's transcribed. Mother's name Kate. Not, it's most likely Kate Dugan that would go on to be his wife. It's listed as a daughter being born March 29th, 1859. Just under 3 months before they were married. And by the way, they're both Irish Catholic. So it doesn't say living. I mean, as you can see here, it's blank where it says living or stillborn. Doesn't list the color. Didn't even give the young girl a first name. Kept out some of the information about the parents, but that was it. So I have still not been able to find a birth record for Alice O'Neill. Everything points to her being born sometime in the 1860 to 1861. I looked at the 1860 census. I found Marty, as listed as Marty and Kate, living in Nashua with no children listed. And that was as of June 12th, 1860. You can always tell if you're looking at a census page, the original digital scan, the original page or the scan of a digital scan of a document, it will list the date that the census taker went around and interviewed people. It listed no children. Knowing the tenets and mores of their religious background, I have to think that this is my great-great-grandmother's birth record. That because she was born out of wedlock, there was a scar on the family, and so it was hidden. Now, if I could find now this would actually be something for me to do. Actually, this is an idea just popped in my head. If I were to check the family's parents' 1860 census, could they might have their granddaughter staying with them? I don't know. That's something for me to look into tomorrow. Well, put a pin in that. So talking this over with other members of the family, this seems like the logical thing that this is Alice O'Neill. So that is an O'Neill mystery, more for another day. Just quick check here. No comments, nobody watching. 24 minutes already. Ooh. I try to keep these at hopefully no longer than 35, 40 minutes. But we'll see how it goes. Okay, next. Gartleys. Gartleys are also on my mother's side of the family and has been a mystery. I actually worked with a woman when I was at Penn State whose last name was Gartley. She was married into the Gartleys. And I had noted that I had family members Gartley. And she said, oh, it's interesting because it's not exactly a common surname. When I first started doing genealogy work in earnest back in 2013 using online sources at the Library of Congress, that involved a lot of surname searching. And like what I do now with my email, but I would take 1 week and I would do checkups on the surnames each day, finding cousins and everything. One of the surnames that was common in my family is the Gartley surname on my mother's side. This would be my my mother's her my mother's maternal grandmother was Ruth Helen Gartley, and her father was Alexander Mervyn Gartley. So that's my third great grandfather. I know when he was born. I know that he was born in St. Johnston, County Donegal in Ireland to a Henry Gartley and Mary Chestnut. I was able to track down Henry and Mary being in the Irish census, having come from Scotland. And I know that Alexander came to the US by way of Liverpool and New York City in 1851. All of that I've been able to find a grave entry. Did a lot of research into his wife, Lydia Ann Little, who I've talked a bit more in previous podcasts as because she was from this area, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. She was on the 1850 census living in Gettysburg and or not outside of Gettysburg in Hunterstown. And my oldest daughter, who's now getting into historical interpretation and role with working at historical sites here in Gettysburg with my grandfather, or with her grandfather and my dad when we're visiting, will dress and take on the persona of her for her four great grandmother Lydia Ann Little. So this was Lydia's husband. He served in the Civil War. Eventually, he moved to Idaho, where he died in 1912. Parents were listed on the death record. I brought them back to Scotland. So I was doing research. This was on the 28th. And it hit me that whenever I searched for surnames for the Gartleys, I got nothing. There is a great website called surnamedb.com, the surname database. It had the Shovlins, which is like not a common surname, but the history was there. It had Angevines. It had so many others, Garvins and Foys and everything. But it did not have Gartleys. And so that was a bit of a stop there. So now I decided to look, and I took a whack at looking at another census record. I was trying to find more stuff on St. St. Johnson as it was listed, and it turns out it's St. Johnstown. If you spell it Saint, this is Johnstown, or if it's st period, it's Johnston. As listed on which is what was listed on the Find a Grave, and that's through basic Wikipedia search, finding out about the town. And then I decided to check the Scotland census that I had found because I had known that my ancestor was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, Henry, and that his wife was also from Scotland. So I just did a search of the Scottish census, and I see a lot of Gartleys coming from Gartley, Scotland. Different spelling, Gartley versus Gartley, the hamlet, as it's called, is Gartly, no E. It's in Aberdeenshire in Scotland, or Aberdeen, Scotland. And and so there I have the origin of the name. It was a hamlet that grew up around Gartley Castle, which had been built by the Clan Barclay in the 15th century. They owned it until the 16th century. Nothing of the castle remains. It had been fallen apart over centuries. And then in 1975, it was partially bulldozed and then completely destroyed as of 1982. So that is, now we know that Gartley is a habitational name, is what they call it, where you get your name from a place that you live. Now, I have found that basically there are considered three classes of ways you get a surname. There's patronymic, which means it comes from your father, Johnson, for instance, son of John, and various other sons, or in some cases in the Irish, O apostrophe, or MacDonald, son of Donald, O'Brien, grandson of Brian, and so on and so forth. Uh, then there is the surnames that come from an ancestor's profession. So think of all the Smiths that are out there. That's because those people are all descended from people who were blacksmiths. So when they were given a surname beyond their original name that they had, the given name, Smith became their surname. Smith, Smitty, Schmidt in German. There's all different references. So John being one of the most common given names, you get a lot of Johnsons. Blacksmith being a very common position, you get a lot of Smiths. Wright, that's Cartwright, Wheelwright. They're all people who fix carts and wheels. Those were where those names come from. So that's the third one. The second one, which is professional. The third one being habitational, and that's if they don't tie you to a family member, they don't tie you to a job, but they tie you to a place you're from. And this was a very common thing in certain areas where it was basically the surname came out of so and so. Angevine, for instance, on my wife's side, my ex-wife's side, is a habitational surname from Anjou, Angevine. In fact, the oldest person on her family line, I have him listed on her tree as Louis d'Anjou, because he was a man who showed up, said he came from Anjou. He had no, so they started calling him Louis d'Anjou, and so d'Anjou became Angevine. Whereas my family name, Shovlin, comes from whether it's not clear whether or not it was actually, well, it's pretty clearly patronymic from my understanding. You had a ancestor of mine, Cheval, which means swift. So that was his given name. And then we had O. Shovlin being the grandson of Cheval. And now Cheval in Gaelic is spelled Sibhal. So that's where my surname comes from. So an idea there. So mine is patronymic, my ex-wife's is habitational, and then there are many others that are profession-based. Final bit of research today to follow up on my research this year is listed here, a grim tale. Now, last week I talked about how I was doing family research into my sister-in-law's family, my brother's wife's family. I spent time on Thanksgiving speaking with her father and mother, filling out their tree. That information I have posted all here on Ancestry. The Wertzes, Brillharts, Strausbaugh, Lormans, Roths, Geis, Laws. So all this information here I was able to get from her parents, the basics, but I had the computer here. I had the connection to Ancestry through Find a Grave, 1880 census, 1950 census, and some other things they were able to tell me. I was able to fill out their tree as you see here. Now, last week I gave you updates on that. I started working on, I had talked about last week how that doing that research, it spawned the idea for a Christmas gift, and that was my sister-in-law buying Ancestry DNA test for her father to try to figure out this hole in the family here, this father of Phyllis Brillhart, Thomas B. Meldrum being her stepfather, but actually tracking down his grandfather. Now, that's going to his part of the Christmas holiday. Now, for me, I was doing it to do a family history chart for my brother and his wife, and that's what I created here. I went to Michael's on a couple nights ago, and right before we went to visit them. And unfortunately, I didn't get it finished and given to them in time. There's still 2 more rows to be done on this here. But as you can see, it's giving them at least 5 years back of family history. And this is something that the paper I chose matches the design of their house so that it fits in with the look of their house, but showing them their family history and something that they can have up on the wall and share and enjoy. That's something I've found that as being an amateur genealogist with the skills I have, I'm able to do these type of things. So that the reason it's not finished mainly was, although I did talk to her parents during the course of the evening, like I talked to her dad first, and once I realized it had been a considerable amount of time, I had gotten to a certain point, and basically I got all of his grandparents and decided, all of his grandparents except for the grandparent, obviously, that's missing. Let me go talk to his wife now. So I had left one of his grandparents with very little research done in talking to him. Then, when talking to his sister in law's mother, I hit the same problem because it was just getting late in the evening and we were getting ready to return home. So that left me with a couple parts of the family that I had done very little research on. And in the week since Thanksgiving, I've filled in the tree on those upper ones, and it was just an error that I forgot those bottom branches. So when I went to make this chart, I realized I was missing research. So I had to do on the bottom branch on her father, the Brillharts. As you can see here, it took a little bit of effort, but I was able to fill in the Brillharts pretty quickly. And in the past week, I filled in the Deckers, and today, the Grimms. His great grandmother, Elmira Jane Grimm, born 1860, died 1927. Now that brings us to today's blog entry, and that's a Grimm tale. As you see, notice I said 1860, and here it says on her find a grave 1861. On the grave itself, it says 1861. So Find a Grave used that information. They knew she was born in February, so that information is listed online for all to see for free. When I searched for her in Ancestry, I found her in the 1880 census, which is provided free to anyone using Ancestry without if you have a free account. But I was then accessing it logged in using my library account, and it showed that she popped up in the 1860 census, which you don't do if you're born in 1861. So I'm like, okay, how late in 1860 was the census done? And it was done in July of 1860, and she's listed as being 5 months old. So this is being 5 months old in July of 1860, which would mean February of 1860. She's still born in February. So now we have a problem. Well, I don't have a problem. I now know that she was born in 1860. You don't fake the census like that. You can't say you're going to have a daughter in 7 months and that she's going to be named Elmira and she'll be 5 months old by July. You can't predict. I mean, 1860s. You may not even know that the mother may not even know that she was with child 7 months out. You're still talking first trimester, and with other children at home, it may have been something not noticed. Now, what I also found on it was another interesting difference. So I found her in the 1870 census, which logically you would as a 10-year-old. And I also found it listed her older sister, Anna, who was listed as 28. So you had parents who were 40, 36, and then a daughter, 28. And that didn't add up, obviously. So looking back at the 1860 census with young 5-month-old Elmira, find that her sister Anna is listed as being 9. So for being 9 in 1860 and 28 in 1870, I know the 1860s was a tumultuous time. You had the American Civil War, Reconstruction, you had the Italian Civil War, you had the Prussian Wars in Europe. That's not enough to age somebody 18 years in 10 years. And so then I looked at the digital file, the digital scan of the 1870 census, and there I saw that it actually is a 1. It's just the hat on the 1 is just tipped a little bit farther over, and the person who transcribed it accidentally mistook it for a 2. So she is 18, as she should be in the 1870 census, and is, from what I can tell, working as a cigar maker. So as I put on ending this post, always remember having, from my genealogy research, having one source is great, but as a rule in journalism, one source is rumor, two sources is fact. And of course, I was talking this over with my daddy, pointed out, make sure those are, in fact, two separate sources. Because if you have two articles that say the same information, check to make sure that the articles aren't using the same source or referencing themselves or the same person. It's always good to have two sources. So that's here I have her grave, her find grave, and the 1860 census. That's two sources. So that's been the fun in genealogy research. I'm going to have much more to cover next week. I should be done with this poster and hand it off to my brother and his wife. I'll be back in Lorton next week. And if you are a Jeopardy fan, on January 7th, we're checking out the second chance competition. My good friend Josh Height will be on. All right, so this is wrapping up this week for Son of Swift Genealogical Pursuits. As a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by some wonderful organizations such as Sticker Mule. Sticker Mule, you sign up today, use the link in the box below, and you can set up your account and be able to get your artwork, your company logo, your company information shared on any items. They have various products, stickers, labels, magnets, buttons. Right now, this week, you get 3x3 Kiss Cut stickers. So those are the stickers where it's a vinyl sticker and has a surround that it cuts out, 3-inch by 3-inch. You get $19 for 50 of them and free shipping. So check that out today if you would like that sort of artwork to be set up. They also do have the ability for you to be able to upload artwork and sell it there. I do that as well, and that's where you can check out my merch store at tpublic.com. That's tpublic.com/stores/Swift. And from there, you can check out the various things I have up there, the t-shirt designs, the things you can get done on hats, pillows, tapestries, bags, various other things. If you're interested in setting up your own merch store, you click on the link below or enter t.pub/lick/AS21, and it'll help you get started with your own merch store. And then you can have your own artwork, your own pithy sayings or whatever. Anything that you've ever thought, I would like that on a t-shirt, TeePublic is your place to go. And finally, thank StreamYard, who set up this setup here that allows me to be able to broadcast to you. I'm on a free account and I'm able to live stream to YouTube, to other accounts, to share the information and to be able to update it as I go. It's been very useful. I've worked with the Trucker's Delight Network and had a lot of fun being able to upload videos and artwork to help spread my information with all of you. So you can click on the link in the description below and sign up if you're interested in doing live stream and having some sort of infrastructure backing you. And they're even offering specials right now through the end of the year. So you've got 2.5 hours. Once again, you can check me out on Tumblr. That's sonofswift.tumblr. And then, of course, you can always email me, Shovlin@gmail.com. That's SEIBHLEAIN at gmail.com. For Son of Swift, the AS21 Network, I'm Keith F. Shovlin. Thank you for watching, and Happy New Year.